Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Classically Chloe Show. I'm your host, Chloe Castillo, and I have another very interesting guest for you today. Benjamin Shrader is the CEO of Shrader Promotions LLC, a coordination director of the Austin Young Republicans, and he has experience in both the fields of music and politics and kind of where these two meet. And so, for the past 8 years, he's worked in Shrader Promotions, organized concerts for the state of Texas, or across the state of Texas, rather, working with artists such as G-Eazy, Wiz Khalifa, Parker McCollum, and many others. So, welcome to the show, Benjamin. Great to have you on. It's going to be super interesting to talk about all this stuff.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you again. I know we first met at a wonderful We the People event, and I'm very excited to talk with you today.
Awesome. Well, same to you. And that was a great event. Chad Prather was the special guest, and Chad's a great friend of mine and a fantastic conservative musician. So, Benjamin, let's just dive into this discussion here. You're clearly very experienced in the music industry with your promotion company, and you've told me that most of the people actually on the back end of this music industry are pretty conservative. So, can you expand on that?
Well, that's something I have really noticed that you'll have a lot of leaders of, I can point to I won't say who, but one of the largest production companies in the state of Texas are, some of the top donors to conservative congressmen and senators. And at first you might look at this and say, why? And of course, there's the aspect of not wanting TABC laws to change and things like that. But there's also widespread conservative values amongst these business people. These are people that are, not artists. They're like myself, they're on the back end, they're organizing events, they're managing the actual company. And they're conservative, but they are afraid to speak out because, of course, sadly, a lot of artists are liberal.
Interesting. So you're saying that the people on the back end of this who like fund these musicians and work with these musicians are largely conservative and donate to conservative causes and politicians, but the artists they support are liberals. Is that right?
That is correct. Now, this isn't 100% of it. There are some companies that the largest one in the state, C3, is may not hold the same values as us, but the second largest and others are
Wow.
much more conservative than one would expect in the industry. And this has given me a lot of hope when I first see this, because if the people with the actual money, if the people who are actually
Mm-hmm.
putting these things on are conservative, and as the culture shifts to where it is more acceptable to say that you're a Trump supporter, to say that you're a Republican, well, who knows? Maybe some of the artists might be won over.
Sure. So I guess my question for you here is what do you think it's going to take to make it acceptable in culture beyond just having Trump as president or having politicians in office who have our values? Culturally speaking, what can we do that can make conservatism as just values wise actually something that's accepted widely and main in a mainstream way in our society?
It's going to be very difficult, and I think the a big part of this is the cultural institutions for so long have been liberal. And why is that? I would say, we lost the schools 40 years ago. After the Cold War
Mm-hmm.
ended and with Vietnam and everything, we lost the schools. And so education became liberal. And I would argue that education, culture, politics, and then our lives, that it's all downstream from that. So that's going to be a big part of it. But what we can do today and how the change is actually going to happen is slowly coming into it ourselves, admitting that, oh, yeah, I voted for Trump, or oh, yeah, I'm a Republican too. And it's slowly winning over people and showing people in the industry that they are not alone, because that's the real fear. The real fear that I have seen is that you say you voted for Trump and the entire room looks at you like you have three heads. That's the fear. That is the concern. But, you can lose your job, you can lose your friends, and that it's terrifying to people. For a long time, even myself, I, though, would allude to it here and there that I was a Republican, that I was conservative, but I kept it relatively close to the vest because, I mean, back back, 2016, I got into this around 2017, 2018. But you look and you say, oh my gosh, if you said something, you could lose your job. So it's slowly
Right.
showing people, and we really have won this in the country music world. There has been a massive shift. You even see this with Wetzel, somebody I've done a lot of work with, a great guy. You see him talking about some conservative values. You see this with artists up and coming. I've got Deepak, a couple other friends and acquaintances who are conservative artists. James O'Keefe is getting into DJing, funny enough. And so we see this spread, this slow change that is starting to happen.
So I want to push back a little bit on that, not disagreeing with you completely, but just kind of like rephrasing it. Maybe I'm wrong because you've been in the industry maybe more than I have. But from what I've seen as a listener in the music industry, is that especially when it comes to country music, it used to be a very conservative space. You had Alan Jackson and George Strait, and this is the 90s, and we can go back farther and it's even more conservative, clearly. But just back in the 90s, you had George Strait and you had Alan Jackson and Clint Black, and all their music had somewhat, of conservative values. And Dolly Parton, for example, she thrived off of the conservative person listener, that was her audience, was the average conservative woman. And it got, I would argue that, her music in particular actually really pushed a lot of conservative women during that time to be more and more feminist, with even fun stuff like 9 to 5. Not that women can't have jobs, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying that kind of mentality that, as someone who has a very conservative base audience, I think a lot of these musicians, Willie Nelson, another great musician who had just to be a liberal, really pushed that kind of ideology later in their music, I would say. But still, even if it was a slow shift, you talked about this too. You just mentioned this is something that has to happen slowly. And I think it's something that conservatives don't really recognize is that this is a slow shift that needs time and that needs support. It can't be an overnight win in an election. It has to be a slow shift that we have to be dedicated to, financially and also just motivationally, I guess, too. And just talking to people, hey, this is important. Let's getting the word out about this is really important. But back to what I was saying, I feel like it's in country music specifically, it was like, we had the conservatives. It kind of like the left infiltrated that. Now we have Beyonce topping the country music charts. It's like, what? This isn't exactly where it used to be. But to what you're saying, I feel like now with people like Jason Aldean and with, many others like that you just mentioned, the country music, the musicians are maybe starting to say, country is country. You guys, you leftists, you radical leftists don't belong here. Let's take it back. So I'm hoping that's the case, that, what once was a great industry that was full of conservatives kind of got infiltrated pretty heavily by the left. And now hopefully we're seeing that and wanting to take it back.
Oh, 100%. And you actually bring up a great point. I was more thinking of recent years, but
Sure.
no, compared to what it used to be. I mean, all of music. I saw in the background, I don't know if your listeners can see it, but you've got a great Frank Sinatra album. And in back in time, I mean, everybody was conservative, and even liberals, we would see them today and we would say that they were conservative. I mean, back in the day, it was just the way things were. And that changed because, we lost the schools, we lost the culture, we lost the
Yep.
war. For a long time, we lost the war. But only now is the comeback happening. So I would say in recent years, it's become more acceptable. There was that period when Trump won for the first time, when he beat Hillary, where the left just went insane. And so that was a time when I saw things be, a lot more liberal, and it was a lot more dangerous to be conservative. Compared to that, it's a lot better now. So, but yes, overall, there's so much work to be done. And I do commend Trump and commend a lot of conservatives for having people like, I know it might seem silly, but Little Pump on stage or rappers or things like this, because it needs to be featured. It needs to be made a priority. It needs to be made a topic of discussion, that we need to win over these cultural figures and get them to back us so that it is clear to people that are smaller, up and coming, that it's safe to be conservative.
Sure. That's a really good point you bring up there. And I want to talk about this a little bit. I haven't really discussed this much on my show since before the election, but I'm glad you bring it up because it's not just like a one and done election. We're through now. So let's talk about this some more about endorsements. So I saw the right making a big deal out of like endorsements like Taylor Swift, especially endorsing Kamala or whatever her name is. They were like, oh my gosh, she's gonna endorse and it's gonna be bad because they're all gonna go vote for Kamala because Taylor said so. And other conservatives who are like, on the more Swifty side were like, well, no, that's not really true because even if she does endorse, which I'm sure she will, at this time, she hadn't done it quite yet. And it was a matter of, oh, well, when she endorses, it's going to be a big deal. And the Swifties who were conservative were more saying, well, not really, because she doesn't have that huge of the fan base that they're actually going to all vote for Kamala just because she said. The ones that are actually going to have their vote swayed that easily are going to vote for Kamala anyway. And even with that said, it's not going to be that many. It's going to overthrow an entire election. But what I always like to bring up with that whole, debacle they were going through there was that it's not really a matter of the actual endorsement that is so, so influential. It's important, but I feel like beyond the endorsement, it's the values that the artist is portraying outside of the political years. It's what they're portraying, what they're teaching their audience, or making normalizing their audience outside of politics itself. What kind of values are they portraying? What kind of values are they saying are normal and acceptable and should be mainstream? That's what's going to sway the vote. Because you have young people who are listening to Taylor Swift saying that, oh, men aren't good. Or I'm just using this as an example. I don't know. Maybe Taylor's not the worst of them. I think more like Doja Cat or Cardi B might be better to call out here. But, the kind of values that people are, and young women especially, are seeing as normal. And with that being said, young women actually have gotten a lot more liberal lately. Young men have gotten more conservative statistically. Young women are a lot more liberal. Like, did you see the map about after the election, if only women had voted? It was like, oh my gosh, like we didn't help in this election apparently. And so it's sad to see. And a lot of people asked, well, how do we get young women to be excited about voting for Trump or want to vote for conservative values? And it's like, well, maybe attack the culture. Maybe attack's the wrong word. Address the culture. Let's get into culture more where they're actually more focused and we can kind of win this over. So what are your thoughts on that whole idea?
Well, I know my fiance contributed just a little bit to a speck of red on that map, but I would say a celebrity endorsement is not actually going to affect the vote that much. I think there are only a few rare ones like Joe Rogan and people like that who are actually might tilt some people. But overall, celebrity endorsements are not going to affect the vote, but they are going to affect the culture. They are going to affect what people think. So winning the artists over for endorsements really isn't going to affect the vote, but it can affect the way that people think. People aren't actually going to vote for someone usually if an influencer or an artist tells them to. They already know who they're going to vote for. Now, when it comes to men versus women, something I've given a lot of talks on and spoken a lot about is how young people are shifting right. And, we see this overall, but when we do look at young women, there is a great concern that a lot are shifting left. And on this, I don't know what the right answer is because, we see with young men, they feel left out, they feel left behind. And so, they're shifting right to people that don't demonize them all the time. But how we're going to win young women over, how we're going to show them that conservative values, pro-life issues, these type of things actually back them, that when the economy does better it helps everyone, how we're going to convey that is something that I am by no means an expert on. And I think culturally, socially, is definitely going to probably be the biggest part of that. If a liberal woman's married to a conservative man, I'd say it's more likely that the liberal woman's going to win out than the conservative man. So that issue, I do not yet know the best solution, and whether that's education or culture, I would say that a pathway like that might win more and more over. And of course, getting more women into politics, getting more women elected, women and female leaders. I was hoping for a long time, JD Vance has been absolutely incredible, absolutely incredible. But I was hoping for a long time that Trump would take a woman as his vice presidential candidate, someone like, maybe even Tulsi Gabbard or someone like that. That was a hope. But getting women into politics, getting women involved, winning women over is going to be critical to the right's future.
Yeah, and I think that with that said, this is just my personal opinion. I think that I personally like seeing men in office and having men in places of power over women just because I feel like women, belong more in the culture or belong more, raising a family or whatever. And I'm not saying women can't be in politics. Don't get me wrong. I think there's a lot of fantastic women in politics. Clearly, we've seen Trump's cabinet has been full of women, and I'm hoping that's going to, turn out really, really well. I'm sure it will. But with that said, I think that it's telling that we're trying to win women over by putting them in political positions to get women to want to vote red, if that makes sense. And I think you have a point there. So I think that it's like, what can we do, I guess, to shift women from being so concerned about, just that women, it's a woman that's there, if that makes sense. Like, vote for Kamala because she's a woman. It's like, well, that's a bad reason, you know what I mean? But there was something to that too. Let's get women excited about wanting to raise their families and wanting to vote because they're raising a family, not because they're killing their children. I mean, all the posts saying, you're voting for your candidate so you can kill your children, I'm voting for mine so that I have, can raise them in a beautiful country. We're not the same. And that's so true. And I think that getting women elected is one thing that I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I think it's actually very influential right now in today's times. But I think that at some point those women can play a role in really pulling in the culture and saying, look, women who you're listening to these artists here and here and here, and who you look up to them and think their lifestyle is great and admirable, let's make those lifestyles one that we want the women of America to emulate and to, aspire to be. Okay, let's not that they're all musicians clearly, but that, they see these women who have beautiful families or who, promote healthy relationships between a man and a woman. That's not this, perverse idea that Doja Cat and Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion are promoting. And so I think that there's a lot to be done when it comes to women in politics and in culture. And I think that having a nice balance between the two is really important. So I really agree with your point there.
If we mentioned, a beautiful family, if those were the songs instead of WAP, I am sure that that would help the culture a lot. Of course, economically, it's crazy that some people in some cases have to pay more taxes when they get married instead of not getting married. That's insane. We need more people. We want big families are important. Myself, I plan to have 4 kids, and so I mean, we have a population collapse coming across the entire world. Birth rates are down. Family values and promoting that in the culture are going to be critical to not only the country's success, but humanity's success.
I
So,
agree.
getting that into the music and doing it in a way that does not seem domineering, that we're not forcing. Like when I'm in a
Exactly.
debate or something like that, I don't always say, uh, I don't always demonize the people. I say, okay, I get that, this baby, this 18-year-old girl is having a baby and it was an unplanned pregnancy, things like that. Like, I get that you're afraid. I get that this is a terrifying thing and you might want to go and, you know, do something that you'll regret. But instead, one, that person has rights, that unborn person. And second, you are making a decision to stand with someone, to raise someone, to have a family, to have a child. And hey, they could be the next Einstein. And you're making the right choice. That a choice isn't always easy, but it's the right thing to do. And so I try to push on that, saying that you can be a really good person, you can do a really good thing, instead of always attacking. But it doesn't always work. But I think language is going to be important. You saw this with a lot of on the left, female influencers and things like that, saying that Trump's language was too much, or even with in Canada with Pollier, that he was too much. But when he started wearing glasses and made more appearances with his wife and talked in a more, I guess, a little bit of a nicer way, he was able to win more of the female vote. So I think finding those ways to speak to women as not, I'm talking at you, this is what you have to do, but, these are things that are important. And if we work together, we can win together. But I'm not a
Absolutely.
woman. Who knows?
Then
Maybe I might be totally just messing up on this, and all the ladies are saying, "Oh my gosh, he's so stupid." So that's a possibility. You can
no, I
speak
think
better
you
to this than me.
No, I think you have some good points. I actually didn't mean to go down this path, but you brought something up. I don't know even where it was, but maybe it was me. I don't know. But it's a really good discussion, though, and I'm glad that we got on the topic too. And you've made a lot of really good points here. Let's take a quick ad break for a couple ads, and then we'll have more Benjamin in just a second. Let's talk some more about your experience in the industry and whatever else we had to discuss here. So, 1 second, we'll be back with Benjamin.
Sounds rolling. All three cameras. We're good. Aiming speed.
Is there any regrets that you have in life? I should sit here and say, yeah, I got a lot of regrets. But when I look back on my life and I understand the lives that were lost, I mean, I'm sitting here with you. And I can tell my story.
Former National Security Advisor Lieutenant General Michael Flynn pleaded guilty today for lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
He was, by definition, the most dangerous possible person for Donald Trump to hire.
Brilliant military career serving 33 years.
Why was he being so elusive?
Mike Flynn told the truth and faced life in prison.
Every American needs this historical DVD keepsake. Flynn delivered the truth, whatever the cost. Hand signed by General Michael Flynn, one of America's most treasured military heroes. Order now at the Patriot TV store. Go to Patriot TV, click on Store, and grab a once-in-a-lifetime chance to own a treasured piece of American history. And get your own personal download link to watch America's most talked-about movie, as well as a DVD hand-signed by General Michael Flynn. Use promo code PTV at checkout to get special savings. The Patriot TV store. Incredible savings and a secure, hassle-free shopping experience.
Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
Welcome back to the show, Benjamin. Great to have you on here. So let's talk a little bit more about your promotion company. And I want to ask you, what would you say are some of the most important key elements of building a successful music industry separate from the left's mainstream Hollywood industry?
Yes, yes. So my company, Shrader Promotions, I started it in college. I was part of a program called Startup Aggie Land that allowed students, basically help students to start businesses. And I said, I got no product. I have very severe dyslexia, so reading and writing is an arithmetic, not my strongest elements. But I had always wanted to be popular. I had always wanted to be well liked. And I know this might seem silly, but it can be very important to a person. And I said, well, what do college kids like to do? College kids like to party. If I control partying, college kids will like me. I had been what I would describe as a loser my entire life, the weird kid who talked about history too much. So basically started this company, and at first it was just promotions, and I would go every single night on Northgate, that's the bar district in College Station. I would be shaking the hands of bouncers. I would be trying to talk to a manager. I would be saying, hey, let me use social media marketing and influencer marketing to promote your events again and again and again. I mean, every single night. I'm not joking. When other people were sleeping, when other people were partying, I was out trying to talk to somebody. And did that for about a year. And really, it was little things here and there. But eventually, with one venue, they gave me a shot, and we took their we almost doubled their sales in a couple of months. And then from there, I expanded to not just doing promotions, but where the real money is at in the music industry, which is production. Event production is where the money is at. That selling the tickets, coordinating the events, that is what I mainly do now, and also a little promotion here and there, but booking the DJ, booking the artist. And now I usually describe it, the company best as really a corporate event company, or corporate events production company. So our top clients, are a lot of companies. They want to put on an event. They come to us. We're full service. We book the artist. We book the sound. We book the staging. We book the venue. If they want to sell tickets, we sell tickets. For a long time, fraternities and sororities were some of my top clients, and we still do some stuff with them. But it's a little easier doing things with the companies, though I do love the Greeks, of course. When it comes to building the parallel music industry, the parallel sort of economy, you have people like Jimmy Levy, you have people like a gentleman named Spirit, who are some of the real, and Deepak, of course, some of the real up and coming conservative artists. We saw Jimmy Levy perform at Amfest. He sung the national anthem. Or the Stars. Yes, he sung the national anthem. Forgive me, and he did a great job. You got people like James McCoy Taylor. You've got a lot of people that are conservative artists. A parallel economy. I have always felt that though it is important, though it is critically important to have, it's going to be difficult, and it's better if we can. Not to build something separate, but to subsume what already exists. Taking over the music industry that already exists is a better option than trying to build a new one from scratch, because you have to think about it. If it's on our end and it's just for conservatives, only conservatives are going to use it. So that economic base is smaller than what is appealing to everybody. So if we can appeal to everybody, we're not only winning over new people, but we have a larger economic base. So getting into the music industry that exists, and I hate to use the word infiltrating, but being there, showing what we are, and having more and more people that agree with us. And even if we can't quite get it to be with us, getting it so that it isn't with the left would be incredible for the culture.
No, I think you make a very good point there. And, it's very difficult when you think about this kind of stuff. What way do we go? Do we go the route of trying to, like you said, trying to avoid the word infiltrate? It's all that's in my head right now, though. What already is, or do we try to create something new? And, I've struggled with this back and forth myself. I think you have a very interesting answer there. So just one last word. We have like 2 minutes on the clock here. So one last word from you. What would you say to conservative musicians who want to get involved? How would you suggest finding people who will promote like yourself, and who will help to organize these kind of events for them? What can they do to kind of scout out these kind of opportunities?
Well, you can, of course, DM me on Instagram, Benjamin_Shrader. That's probably the easiest way to reach me. I would say this is a tough one, but you have to find people that are aligned with you. At first, if you haven't already gone out and been political, at first I would try to find people apolitically. And then I would make the transition to it once you've had a little success. If you are political already, then it's a matter of going to events, going to things like Amfest, like the We the People event we were at, and trying to meet people who are in the music industry and conservative, and then from there working with them. And if you have friends and you have a guy that's good with computers and likes to talk to people, say, hey man, you want to be my manager? Let's work something out. Some things like that. You have to meet people that are on your side.
Absolutely. Benjamin, where can my audience find you?
Well, of course, Instagram is my main social media, Benjamin_Shrader. the website, ShraderNation.com, and Shrader with no C, Shradr. My father would joke it's cheaper without the C. Those are some of the best places.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for this discussion. It was super interesting to hear your take on all of this as someone who has actually been involved in the industry somewhat from another perspective beyond that of a musician. So, Benjamin, thank you so much for joining me. Great to have you on.
Amazing to be here. Thanks so much.
Thank y'all so much for listening. Please subscribe to the podcast on Rumble, YouTube, and Spotify to stay up to date on the latest episodes. Please also follow me at classically_Chloe on Instagram and classically Chloe on all other platforms. Stay tuned for the next episode next week. God bless.